It has become kind of inevitable or a self-fulfilling prophecy that the morning sessions of the third day are for the greatest enthusiasts and true believers only. So congratulations, you have made it. As a reward, we have a wonderful panel composed of distinguished architects and leaders of cyber defense exercises, led by Mr. Jim Ng from the US European Command Joint Cyber Center. Welcome, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you very much. Just want to take a couple minutes and really thank Guard Time for last night's fantastic venue. I know we had a couple of, I guess, MIAs missing in action from last night. That's why there's so few people here right now. I think they'll stagger in a little bit later, but that was a great venue. It's probably the most awesome venue I've been to in all my travels, so thank you, Guard Time, for that. Once again, good morning, everyone. My name is Jim Ng. As stated, I am from the United States European Command's Joint Cyber Center. I get the privilege today of leading our panel of exercise experts over here. With me today is Mr. Tom Koolen, who is one of the leads for Cyber Coalition, and Dr. Tomasius, who is the Cyber Europe lead, and then finally Dr. Rain Otis, who is the Lock Shields lead. So why do we exercise? Of course, as everybody probably knows, practice makes perfect. In the last couple of days, we sat through many seminars, panels. You've listened to a lot of different briefs, and hopefully you're going to take what you learn here back to your organization, and you're going to start developing those techniques, tactics, procedures, standard operating procedures, checklists, those types of things that make your organizations better. But eventually, you're going to have to do something with that. You're going to have to practice and use some of those things. So what better venue than to actually practice those things in a controlled environment, something that you can manage, like the exercises that you're going to hear about later on today. So planning is difficult. It takes a lot of money. It takes a lot of resources, a lot of manpower. For instance, during your initial planning conference, you're actually developing your objectives, you're outlining your task, your roles and responsibility, and then you finally get to your mid-planning conference where you're actually looking at refining, getting those cyber ranges in play. You're looking at making sure that you have the right people in the right spots. And finally, you get to your final planning conference where you're making sure everybody is on the same sheet of music, that everybody knows exactly what to do. And finally, you get to execution. This execution could take anywhere from 2 days to 2 weeks to a couple of months. It all depends on what your objectives and effects are. So during execution, everything's happening at once. You have your white teams managing your exercises. You have your red teams attacking, your blue teams defending. You have the legal aspects. You have public affairs plans. So there's many, many different things happening. And what's the one word that makes everybody happy during an execution? Index. So there you go. Index happens, and everybody's high-fiving, pat themselves on the back. But it's not quite over yet, because after the execution phase of it, you have to go into your lessons learned, your after-action review, and you have to bring all those things together in order to make next year's exercise even better. So there's a lot of different planning, and it takes a lot of resources in order to make that happen. So let's go ahead and get going with our panel discussion. And what I'm going to do is kind of let the different leads kind of introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about what their exercise is all about, and maybe a little bit of detail about the exercise in particular. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Tom Koolen, who is the lead for Cyber Coalition. Sir.
Thanks, Jim. My name is Tom Koolen. I work for NATO. I work for the NATO Communication and Information Agency in The Hague. I'm actually part of the education and training service line. So my background is really exercise and training, and I rolled into Cyber Coalition. I'm currently the Deputy Director of Cyber Coalition 17. I've been involved in Cyber Coalition since Cyber Coalition 10, so this is my 8th exercise. A bit of short introduction to Cyber Coalition. Cyber Coalition is a NATO exercise. It runs yearly, 3 consecutive days, usually at the end of November. Cyber Coalition is there to train the NATO cyber defense elements, NATO nations and partners in the collective cyber defense. That's the objective. We're trying to build a team out of all the players, the cyber defense players available within the NATO alliance. I truly believe that within the NATO alliance we have more or less the best cyber defense players available, but as in sports teams, buying the best individuals doesn't make the whole thing as a team a success during a match. So what we're trying to aim with Cyber Coalition is actually to train the team in operating together. If we look at Cyber Coalition, we have over 700 individuals in the training audience. They are spread over more than 30 locations throughout Europe and Northern America. For Cyber Coalition, we assume that all these individuals are very well trained, that they're very good at their own skills. We also assume, as a prerequisite for the exercise, that all the national teams are trained in their national procedures and in their own national skills. Because the aim of the exercise is really bringing this all together, looking at, from a NATO perspective, what are the capabilities that are out there, that are available to us as a NATO alliance, and how can we combine those skills in an efficient and effective way so that we can actually defend NATO's core business and the NATO alliance against any cyber attack from any opponent. I think that's Cyber Coalition in a nutshell. Happy to tell you more.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Let's move on to Cyber Europe.
Yep. My name is Panos Trimigios. I coordinate and I'm the director of Cyber Europe since the first version. We ran this exercise since 2010. So we have already, and it's a biannual exercise, so we organize it every 2 years. The latest version was 2016. The exercise is a civilian exercise. It's not focused on military, although a lot of the countries that are playing are engaging the military and the cyber defense teams. The exercise is organized by my agency, the European Cybersecurity Agency, ENISA. The organization, though, engages planners from all the countries who are participating in the exercise. The exercise has evolved since 2010. I'm going to focus mostly on the latest one, refer to it. We engaged all the 28 European Union member states into this exercise, as well as 2 non-EU countries, Switzerland and Norway. The exercise planning takes around 1.5 years. It's a huge effort. In the latest version, we had something like around 500 organizations who played in the exercise and almost 1,000 participants. It was a huge effort. We have a focus. The focus of the exercise is cooperation, similarly as to Cyber Coalition. So it's not a competition. It's not a capture the flag type of event. So our motto is stronger together. And when we say cooperation, we are meaning cooperation at different levels. Cooperation within an organization during a cyber incident, cooperation between organizations, cooperation at the national level, as well as at the EU level. So we try to test all these different levels. So we are looking at a mixture of cyber security incident analysis, as well as business continuity type of response that is required from the participants. Yeah, the focus, as I said, is mostly on civilian. The scenarios are based on real-life incidents, and we put a lot of emphasis in our exercises on the visualization and the visual reality, so we try to mimic a lot of what's happening in the real world during a cyber incident, because a lot of the information that you will get during such events will come from social media, from actual mainstream media. So we try to put all these elements into the exercise and try to make the training audience also familiar with this kind of situations. So I don't know if
I think you captured really quite a bit. We'll go ahead and move on to lock shields.
Thank you. Good morning. So my name is Rainotis, and I'm the head of white team for the lock shields exercise, which basically is the exercise control cell that also does various other functions. This is a NATO CCD COE ran exercise, not a NATO exercise specifically, which basically also means that some non-NATO nations who are contributing partners in the CCD COE can participate in the exercise. It is quite a bit more experimental than the other two exercises because we are not playing as NATO or as EU or as nations. We give the players a fictional scenario, and that actually frees our hands to give them almost the worst possible scenario that they have to deal with. So each year we try to up the challenge. It is primarily a technical challenge, both for us, the organizers, and for the players. But we have also plenty of non-IT or non-technical aspects that they have to figure out, such as legal injects, media injects. And as of this year, we also started a strategy track to see how those two different levels manage in the context of the same exercise. Just to give a bit perspective, it's also a fairly well developed exercise series by now. We started in 2010 after a pilot in 2008. It's an annual exercise at this point, and we had about 900 people involved in the exercise in various roles in 2017. On the technical side, we are talking about 3,000 virtual machines that are being run throughout the exercise execution. They are being attacked by a live red team using live exploits, using actual malware that works on actual systems, and also including what we call special systems, but basically they are just your IT systems that keep the world going. So we're talking about SCADA systems, Internet of Things. And this year we had very good collaboration with Siemens, for example, who helped build us a power grid system, which was an interesting challenge for the teams. Unlike the other two, we actually score the technical game. We don't do it because we want to give out a trophy, although I'm sure Sven does like that part of the game. We really do the scoring in order to give them feedback. What are you doing good? What are you doing bad? What you should perhaps change in your approach. So the scoring system is built to reward positive behavior or good tech practices and to correct you if you are engaging in something other than what is considered to be in the spirit of the exercise. Right. So perhaps that's enough for the introduction.
Okay, sounds great. So different exercises actually exercises different things. As you can see, within Cyber Coalition, they're actually looking at the strategic, operational, and tactical level, whereas Cyber Europe is actually helping public and private sectors in cyber defense, whereas Lock Shields is mainly a technical exercise. Some exercises have been coming up on 10 plus years in execution. How do you ensure that you keep the exercise, fresh and keeping the audience or the training audience coming back for more and more? How do you incorporate what's happening out in the real world into your exercises?
Yeah, I think for Cyber Coalition, we're blessed with our core planning team and with the storyline leaders that we have, because these are really professionals. They're operationally engaged. They know what's happening currently. And to be honest, I don't have to put a lot of effort in to get a lot of brilliant ideas related to what's really the current threats, what's currently going on. And we've seen in the last couple of cyber coalitions that actually we're on the good track, because sometimes threats that we're trying to build in the exercise surface between the initiation of the storyline and the actual execution, or somewhere after the execution. So I think we're on the good track, and I think the best thing is to have people that are out there in the field, also in your planning team, because they come up with the bright ideas, and I just have to manage the bright ideas, not to become too wildly spread and lose the overall scenario.
Sounds good. What about for Cyber Europe?
Yeah.
How do you
First of all, similarly to Cyber Coalition, Cyber Europe is well established, and luckily enough, we are not trying to fish for participation. Actually, we have a lot of people who are coming to us to participate in Cyber Europe, and unfortunately, we cannot accommodate all. So on that part, we are quite lucky. On the preparation and trying to make the exercise interesting, we are using a mixture of, let's say, traditional incidents which are everybody should know how to resolve and to deal with, and also some innovative ideas. So in each exercise, we try to put some elements there, like in the latest version, IoT type of attacks, or drone attacks with drones, or a mixture of physical and cyber attacks together. So we try to put elements of innovation into our scenarios,
Right.
so that keeps the attraction of everybody, as well as the traditional cyber incidents where everybody should know how to deal with.
Fantastic. How about for lock shields?
Right, so lock shields as a technical exercise can basically look into the real world and see what is happening. If a new operating system comes into play, we can include it in the game. If a new, let's say, type of technical problem, a new type of malware or something appears into play, we can use it. So we keep a very watchful eye on the developments in the world, and take this inspiration to update our scenario, both on the technical level, but also in terms of the greater gameplay. The cooperation that we have with certain industry partners allows us to also access the current state-of-the-art technology that is running the world. So we're talking about drone controllers, we're talking about power grid, and obviously bringing those into the game is an interesting challenge for the defending teams, the blue teams, and having been involved in this exercise since its beginning, I feel that every year we get double-digit growth in almost every aspect that we measure. More people, more machines, more complex scenario, and I'm not exactly sure if there is a point where our version of the Moore's law will taper off, but so far we don't really see that boundary. What the technical environment allows us to do, we always do, and then we try to do a bit more to squeeze the last percentage out of the environment that we have. So yeah, we do try to make it as realistic as possible.
Fantastic. I know that we have within the audience a lot of non-European nations attending, and for some of the organization out there that want to develop their own exercise to test cyber defense, there's a lot of resources that's required. A question for you would be, where do you even begin? I mean, how do you even start something like that if you wanted to build your own exercise and make it, premier exercises like each one of yours? So, how do you do that? I mean, where do you even begin?
Sure. Want me to start again?
Sure. We'll just keep
Okay.
going.
Someone needs to call the exercise. So someone needs to specify the aim of the exercise. And I think that's very important, that you, especially if you start up a new exercise, that you limit the aim of the exercise. This is For the first time, if I run an exercise, this is what I'm really trying to achieve. Like the aim for Cyber Coalition is really to see how we combine all those different elements within NATO, within the nations. How can we combine that to an effective cyber defense? That's the aim. You need to specify that, and that's the first thing you need to specify. You should not think about any content of the exercise before that, because otherwise you will be repairing whatever you came up with to fit the aim.
Sure.
So really start at the beginning. Once you have that, and once you have identified your training audience, go and sit with that training audience and really think about what kind of processes do you want to go through. Discuss with them, make some kind of quick analysis of their main processes and the conditions that they want to see during the exercise. So is it going to be a stressed exercise, going to be time constrained? What are the objectives and the conditions that you want to see happening during the exercise? From then it becomes much easier, because once you've concluded about that, and that's important, that everybody agrees that this is what we want, then you can start the creative work. That's what I always say. Then you invite people with creative ideas, and they can come up with loads of ideas, and you're just going to pick and choose what you think is going to make a fit for the training objectives.
Right.
So really start with thinking and discussing with your training audiences what is it what you want to achieve, under which conditions.
Okay, well,
Very
fantastic.
important.
All right. How about Cyber Europe? How do you?
Yep. If I was to start again, as in any major project, the first thing you have to have is the buy-in from management. The decision makers need to understand the need to give you the right resources to go ahead. So the first thing is to have the buy-in from the management, and the second most important thing is to have the buy-in from the participants. You mentioned engaging the training audience.
Yeah.
I think that's the second most important one. When you start, you need to engage them from the beginning. And how we are doing it, we are involving them in the planning process. So all those organizations from the different countries who will play, obviously not all, but the representatives, points of contacts from different countries are involved in the planning process. So that's the second most important thing for me.
All right, fantastic. How about Lock Shields?
Right. I also agree that those 2 points are very important. You have to have buy-in. You have to have a clear objective when you begin. So I would say that the third component, which probably works for you as well, is start small. Do not try to replicate Lock Shields or Cyber Europe at its current state. Those exercises have taken years to reach that level. So if you are just beginning, start small. The very first exercise we did in this series, we had only 4 teams defending. Then we moved to 6, 8, 10, 12, and now we're at 20. And perhaps still growing in the coming years. Each of those steps has been a serious challenge. Going from 10 to 12 is a challenge. Going from 12 to 16 is a challenge. And you just take some time to solve these challenges. Because if you try to take Lock Shields in a box, try to just replicate what the CCD COE has done, then I can assure you, you're going to have a very exciting first year. It may not be as much fun as you hoped, but you will learn a lot. But if you want to have a slightly more successful first year, then just set an objective that makes sense, that you can actually overcome in the beginning.
More follow-up question, and maybe we'll open up to the audience to maybe if you have some questions. But one follow-up question to that is, funding continues to be an issue with exercises. Where do you get the funding? How do you keep your costs down in order to make the exercise relevant and meaningful to everybody? Let's start with Lock Shields this time. We'll work our way backwards.
Thank you. So obviously exercises cost money, and what you really need to figure out is the cost of the exercise. Is it more or less than what you get? And this is a difficult question because mostly what you get from the exercise cannot easily be measured in terms of money. But you have to think about it. Why do I do this in the first place? If we look at lock shields, then for sure there is a budget, and the CCD COE can comment on this if they wish. But we also benefit from a lot of goodwill that has developed over the years. Right. So there's an enormous amount of volunteer work that actually occurs during the planning process, during the execution process, meaning that we don't actually outsource everything to companies, or we don't have to hire people to fulfill every role. There are plenty of volunteers who want to be part of the game from their own free time. This only goes so far, so you cannot just do a major exercise completely for no money at all. At the very least, you have to provide lots of coffee and Coca-Cola. This is what we have seen.
Basic cost.
It is actually a worthwhile investment. But you can also, for example, approach companies and tell them that, okay, we can't buy your solution, but we can offer you a safe place where you can experiment. So the training audience gets the benefit of training on the equipment or software. The company gets the benefit of throwing their equipment in the worst possible scenario, right, and see how it holds up. And we get to benefit that it actually helps keep the costs down. So looking for these sort of win-win-win opportunities is a must if you want to do this on a reasonable budget.
All right, fantastic. Well, how about the First Cyber Coalition? How do you guys manage to keep your costs, within, control?
Yeah, NATO is a large organization, so in principle there's a lot of money, but large organizations also has a huge competition over that budget. So there's by default you don't get the same budget as you had last year, because by default it's taken by someone else who tries to compete with you. So you're always in a fight to get your share of the budget, and the best way to get the budget that you need is really link your cost to what you're trying to achieve, and link your cost to what you're building for it, and why this is important. So we often get that to discussion as, well, yeah, this costs this much money, but if we wouldn't invest this, then this is what you lose. And then it comes really back down to the exercise objectives and the aim of the exercise. If this is the aim, then this is the minimum cost that we have. Right. And if we want to excel from that, then we make also use a lot of national contributions, which don't cost our organization money. Of course, it's still costing money. In the end, an exercise costs a lot of man-hours to prepare and develop. And you always have to come down, so what does this add? If I exploit this cyber range to this extent, how much does it add to my exercise objectives? And it's a fight every year. So far, we always manage to get a reasonable, good budget to build an exercise. And sometimes you have to limit the expectations or limit your ambition based on that.
You ever have to actually scale back because you don't get enough funding?
This year we had to scale back a little bit, but we try to relate it to what we're providing, and I think that's the only argument to make it successful, is that you relate, I'm investing this because I'm going to get this out of the exercise.
Right, in return, right. So, wrap up for Cyber Europe, how do you guys keep your costs under control?
We have a certain budget over the years, which is somehow safeguarded by the work program and the policies of the European Union. So they have it in there that we should exercise, and therefore the budget is available. Now the problem comes where within the budget doesn't increase. So over the years you have the same budget. So within that same envelope, you need to increase and improve your exercise. So how do you do that with the same budget? And this is where I would tend to agree with lock shields. Over the years, we insourced a lot of the technical preparations, a lot of the development of incidents. And try to outsource only what is necessary, like some expertise that we are lacking, like media expertise, etc. So insourcing is one solution. And the second, again, similarly to what Lakshil said earlier, the volunteers, although we don't have a pure volunteer, let's say, program, we do try to engage young people who just came out of the university. They are eager to help with very little money. So every year we have this kind of a turnaround of people where at the same time, while helping us to prepare the exercise, they are trained and they are also becoming better, and they find a way into the industry later on. So these are the two elements that will help us to improve the exercise within the same envelope we have in the budget.
Fantastic. So at this point, once we opened up to some questions, I know some of the audience members out there maybe have something burning on their mind right now. So if you have a question or anything that you want to ask, please feel free. We have somebody.
Hi, this is Mark Filachhazi from Crisis Lab Hungary. Tom, you mentioned several times that the outcome is, that the goal is very important. Can you actually name a few examples how you can represent, the benefits from the cost? So, previous concrete examples, like what you tell, like this is the outcome of the exercise.
You mean to the cost, to my last remarks? That was the, yeah. For instance, we within Cyber Coalition we try to get technical incidents and technical threats into the training audience with the aim to get the collaboration, to get the operational and strategic level working. What we saw in the early years of Cyber Coalition often is that these technical elements were not related well enough. And at some point we started using a cyber range, which made it possible to develop a real consistent base of logs and evidence and things. So everything worked together, and it was really, because all the nations are represented in there with a segment, so we managed to get a better context for the operational and strategic level, because it was consistent, it was put together. So we managed to get more effect on that level. And of course, that is the investment in a technical environment. So you put a lot of cost in, and then you get the effect out of a better exercise. And that was, we do afterwards always a post-exercise analysis, and there we try to figure out how well did we do, and what did we provide to the training audiences, where can we improve, and we saw a huge benefit there.
Right. Sir.
Hi, good morning. We have here a NATO exercise, EU exercise, and an exercise which is bankrolled by the countries belonging to NATO and or EU. Could you now please describe the cooperation between those three exercises, which are all funded by the same countries? Thank you.
No. Rain, you wanna begin?
Right. So obviously they are all dealing with cyber, so that's not it. But if we look at the primary focus, or the declared focus at least, to me it seems that lock shields is very, very tech heavy. Right. And it is very, very, let's say, experimental, and perhaps not always looking at the real procedures that would be used, but saying that, okay, well, you're in a situation now where perhaps your current procedures won't even work, because the situation is so much worse. The typical lock shields blue team gets thrown into a sort of a worst case rapid reaction team scenario where you're landing into a place, you have no real understanding of the systems, there's nobody you can ask for assistance, because we basically developed the scenario in a way that you for some reason, either the local admins are not there or cannot be trusted. So you need to go there, figure out what is going on in this network at all. You have to assume it is compromised before you show up. And from minute one, there's going to be hostile activity against you. So there's a lot of sort of technical emphasis that continues throughout those 2 days. So it's, yes, we do have injects, we do have media, legal play, we have strategic play, but the vast majority of effort, both in terms of organizing the exercise and in terms of the players' time spent, is definitely solving these very quickly evolving, nasty technical problems. We are also somewhat less scripted, perhaps, and you can correct me later if that is wrong. So for our red team, we give them the objective, and then we tell them, you pick your own methods, right? You pick the tool that you need. If the first one doesn't work, they are allowed to go and try a second thing and a third thing. So the main idea is to provide a constant pressure from the adversary that would somewhat mirror the real life, in the sense that the adversary, if they tried their 1,700 hours, I'm going to do this thing, it failed, done. They don't give up, right? They will try something else. And this is what we try to emphasize on this the technical level game, that just because you were successful in defending this specific system against this specific threat doesn't mean that you are now safe and secure. They will try something else. Maybe not here, maybe not with the same thing, but they will come back.
Yeah, let me go straight to the... So to be brutally frank, the cooperation so far, at least formally, there was none. It's actually the first time on public that we are sitting together. And again, that has some kind of it doesn't have to do with the nations which are funding, let's say, this project. It has to do more with the political situation and the cooperation at the highest level. At the staff level, we do know each other. We know people who organize and participate in cyber, in lock shields and the coalition. So at the staff level, we do have, but at the highest and formal level, there was no cooperation. That's until the end of last year, where we had the joint declaration. I'm sure that many of you know about it. And one of the points there explicitly mentioned the cooperation on the different exercises, and namely Cyber Coalition and Cyber Europe. Between EU and NATO. So that's mentioned there. The next steps have already started. We have been discussing with NATO on how to, as it is mentioned in the declaration, reciprocal cooperation and exchange of staff between the different exercises. So let's see. The future, I think, will only bring more cooperation rather than not at all, as it was so far.
I can add one thing. I think you covered it correct. There is, of course, a benefit to all the participants for all the different exercises. One is really more technical. The other ones are more operational, or more at the political and collaboration level. But there are different constructs. So there's a NATO construct and there's an EU construct. And they come with their own political context. You need to exercise that framework. You need to exercise that context. You need to be to understand how it works, and how you gain from it, and how you contribute to it. And since those constructs exist next to each other, you also need to train those constructs both, because they are not, it's not a combined construct. It's not a NATO-EU construct where you collaborate. It's two things. So there are always choices. Whatever incident you have, is which direction do I go? Which construct do I take? Do I take both? So you need to exercise that. So I think it's a value. Both exercises have a very huge value to train and exercise. What do we have? What have we decided at the political level? How we collaborate? What we need to do is not only on the exercise level collaborate more, but also in the construct, see how that politically actually works together and how they combine those efforts.
Right. Okay.
Michael Gramala, Air Force Institute of Technology. I have a question about exercises in general. A lot of times the initial conditions of the exercise aren't always representative of what one might find in a real infrastructure. So my question is related to the defenders and their prioritization of their activities. So for example, I'd be interested to understand what the initial conditions of the systems are. Are they all initially loaded and patched, or are there some intentionally unpatched, or are there configurations that are misconfigured? Because these are the real challenges, and understanding the ability of a defensive team to overcome the challenges is sometimes hindered by the ability to give the defending team an initial start where they patch everything perfectly, and you're forced to more inject artificially problems.
Yeah, I'll start here. So like I mentioned before, we tried to concoct this perfect storm, which is unrealistic in the sense that hopefully you will never see something that bad. But if you can survive it, then everything else should be much easier to handle. So yes, we give them systems that are partially unpatched. We give them systems that may have backdoors already in there. So a hostile actor might already have presence in your network. You don't know, you have to find it first. We give them sometimes misleading documentation, and we always give them documentation that is partial. So they will actually have to come to this unknown environment as a rapid direction team and use the skills, tools, and knowledge that they have to figure out what is the actual situation. They cannot assume that everything is okay, because this is also true in the real world. If you go somewhere where you don't work every day, you don't know if everything is correctly implemented, correctly configured. If you maybe have a slight APT problem that you have to find somehow. This is why we try to throw all these different challenges for the blue teams.
And I know for Lock Shields, I know you give the teams a familiarization period where they actually can get on the networks and things like that, so they're not going in completely blind. At least they have something they can actually go with, and then
they do have
fall back, right?
Yes, they do have a familiarization period where they can basically scope out most things, right. And after that we introduce a couple of extra things, because again, the idea is to keep them always worried about what the adversary is doing, as you would in a real situation.
How does Cyber Europe, how do you manage?
Yeah, I think I tend to agree. We do give partial information to the participants prior to the exercise. We give them, let's say, a partial view of the state of the world, both in terms of the situation overall, as well as the systems and their own incidents. And yeah, it's part of the exercise to figure out a lot of the things, because this is how it is in reality.
And for Cyber Coalition?
Yeah, I'm thinking how to answer this, because what we're trying to achieve within the 3-day exercise of Cyber Coalition is very much about the operational and tactical level. So we don't have a lot of time to actually give the training audience on the technical construct. Right. We more or less have to give them the incident or the threat very clearly and very rapidly on the first day, and they have to go from there, because our aim of the exercise is not that the technical teams do the most sophisticated thing. The challenge and the aim of the exercise is that the technical teams provide the evidence to the next layer so that they can decide which direction to go. How do we going to do this? Are we going to handle this nationally? Are we going to handle this within NATO? How are we going to ask for help? Are we going to collaborate? So our focus is more or less, this is the incident, this is the status, and then they just do the quick analysis. So we don't play a lot with that level.
And I know for Cyber Coalition, it's mainly trying to get countries together to actually cooperate, as opposed to technical teams defending a range.
Yeah,
so that's,
yeah, absolutely.
Right.
So that's just a very small part of our exercise.
Right. So.
Maybe just to comment difference here. So we give them a bad situation, but we make it worse throughout the process. We also have a user simulation team that basically are the secretaries, the generals, the people who use the systems every day, who are happily clicking away on things, right? So it is not a static system that you get. It actually can devolve throughout those 2 days if you do not pay attention, if you do not respond to the situation correctly.
Okay. I think we have a question in the back, or? Oh, go ahead, Jeff, he's got the mic.
Good morning. Thank you very much for that. I'm Chris Harper. I was formerly the Director General of the International Military Staff at NATO headquarters, and I'm here with a company called Improbable now. I am very aware of the success of the exercises you describe in exercising and improving the cyber layer of defense. But could I have your comments, please, on how well you think that layer is integrated with all of the other exercises that are necessary to develop both NATO and the EU's capability to deal with conflict or crisis in a real strategic exercise situation?
Very good question. Who wants to take that one on?
I would like to reply, I'm just the deputy director, and even if I would be the director of the Cyber Coalition, I'm just building, developing, and executing the exercise. We try to get those cyber defenders within NATO and within the NATO nations to work together and to exercise that. That still leaves a whole area uncovered by my exercise. And NATO has many more exercises where they incorporate cyber effects. The problem is always how do you... The whole environment is too complex to exercise in one exercise. So you always focus on bits and pieces and then try to get at least those processes trained and exercised. I think we can still improve. There's still a lot of room to take cyber also in other constructs than the purely cyber defenders context. But unfortunately, that's not my call.
But eventually, most of what we do in terms of exercise and stuff like that, we want to evolve that, make it better, incorporate other exercises into other exercises. I mean, is there some thinking later on down the road that maybe the different exercises could be rolled into a bigger military joint exercise where you actually have land, air, sea, everything all merged into one? I mean, that's kind of what we're asking.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I tried to point at is if you do that, you really increase the scope of your exercise. You're trying to mimic a whole crisis, which is very, very difficult. If we see all the other exercises that we're running component-based exercises, we're running joint exercises, we're running all kind of certification exercises, but they all have already their aim. And combining all of that, that would lead to an exercise of a month to be able to give all the objectives a fair amount of effort and attention during the exercise. So it's difficult to have this overall exercise. So you're at least try to cover all the bits and pieces, and then in different constructs try also to do the interaction.
And then for Cyber Europe, I know you're mostly focused on public and private.
First a comment. Strategic exercises are much more difficult to organize rather than operational or tactical exercises. Not because of the difficulty in terms of the incidents and the index that you have to design, but because of the audience. You are talking to strategic people, high-level people, and attracting them is difficult, and having them for an exercise over 2 hours, I think it's almost impossible. We've experimented a few years ago, and actually we saw that it doesn't work. Now, going back to specifically responding to your question about the EU and the other crisis structures, at the EU level, there are these high-level political arrangements for responding to any type of crisis, not only cyber. You have a crisis from immigration to economic to any other type of crisis. So you have this construct, and in 2014, at the end of Cyber Europe, where actually the situation, as in the other exercises, during the course of the exercise, the situation becomes worse and worse, where at the end of the day you reach to a point where the cyber people or the operational people are no longer able to resolve the situation, so you need to go at a higher level. So we were at that point, and we fed that scenario at that point to a political level exercise, and actually, to be honest, it was very well received. It was the first time that they were dealing with a cyber scenario, so they were happy. I think the year after they did another type of crisis, and the year after that the same. But I think they told us that they will do one more on cyber in the year after. So that's the integration, the closest integration. So providing the scenario of where you are at the operational level to the political level, to the decision-making level, to the strategic level, to take it from there. That's what we did in 2014. One more point, there is an exercise that actually, by coincidence, will be held here in Estonia in September. It's organized by the presidency, by the Estonian presidency, where it will be a high-level strategic exercise with a scenario being cyber, and that will be at the level of the ministers. So that's another element of a strategic exercise and scenarios that can be built down. Having a full-scale exercise and a full exercise jointly exercising the tactical, technical level, the operations and the strategic, I think it's impossible.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's a no-go to get those combined.
Yeah.
So I have the benefit of having Tallinn University of Technology written here, not NATO or EU, so academic crazy hat on. So I'll provide a provocative answer for that. We haven't fully integrated with other, let's say, classical exercises because we're not allowed to. Because we would be seen as ruining your exercise. We would not be allowed to attack your systems. You would not be willing to let cyber incidents on your command and control, on your battle management systems, on your communication systems, because then you would no longer be able to control your troops. Or, if it's a civilian exercise, then communicate with the different critical infrastructure parties. If you can no longer trust the information systems that you are supposed to use, you would actually have to operate your exercise in real degraded mode. Not simulated, but real degraded mode. And I have yet to see let's say, a classical exercise player tell me that this is something that they are ready and willing to do. I'm not saying that this would be easy to do from the cyber perspective, and we would be, somewhat less aggressive and successful than we have in Lakshos, where we have full control of the environment. But really, those of you who have run, let's say, actual exercises with tanks and airplanes and ships, would you really allow us to come and hack your submarine while it is submerged? Put some software on your aircraft when it is flying? I don't think so. So there is the sort of fundamental answer why we don't see this very much. So we see halfway solutions, right? We have solutions where there is a cyber inject in a standard exercise where you get a piece of paper that says that, okay, well, this thing happened. But your system is still operational, right? You can still use it to talk to your troops, to your commanders, to your superior commands. You can still look at some sort of a radar picture and you expect it to display what it's supposed to display. I mean, in Logshields this year, we had the RC2 system, and we actually simulated a flight of unknown aircraft flying over your country. Those aircraft were not there, they were completely, fake, right? We injected this data into the system. But yeah, I'm not exactly sure that the rest of the world is ready for this level of cyber exercise.
All right, fantastic. Oh, another question?
Thank you. And this has been a great panel, in particular in highlighting the different focus areas of the exercises, which is so incredibly grateful. Now, I've had the good fortune and the dubious honor of running a non-technical part of the Logshields exercise for Rhine for a few years now. So reminding the techies that there's a world out there and they're there to provide something for society rather than just secure a system by unplugging it, which is not great for availability. And what this panel also so eloquently highlighted, particularly Tom, you, is that everyone who's organizing exercises struggles with reflecting the complexity of the real world, of bringing together all the layers from operational to strategic decision making. So we get these different exercises. We get one that's focused on strategic decision making. We get one that really puts emphasis on the routines and the cooperation. And we get one where you get to wear t-shirts the whole time and be very proud of it, the technical one. But the fact that it's not, those levels have not been exercised together, for me, is more of a reason to do so, more of a need to do so. And of course, there are the difficulties. A technical exercise and a technical incident has a very different time frame from a cooperation focus and definitely from a strategic decision-making exercise. So bringing those together and integrating them is hard. However, if we're to be successful in any of the cyber exercises, we need to train as we fight. And we fight as nations with our full chain of command. We need to be able to exercise that tech is handling an incident and actually handling it, not just a sit rep that goes up the chain of command. The operational management making decisions that then eventually travel up to strategic decision making and potentially the international level. So if all three of you could dream of how to do it, instead of saying it's not been done and we cannot do it, because I come from a pacifist, activist, let's get it done type of a world into this military environment, how would you go about putting together cyber exercises that remain international, so they're realistic in representing the diversity of national structures and diversity of cooperation needed, but that exercise the whole national chain of command in one go? How would you go about it?
So if you were king for a day, how would you do that?
I would say it's impossible, and not because it's impossible, but because it's a waste of resources and attention. The big problem, if you combine these layers, is the time that is needed and required by the people. Because we did, also with Cyber Coalition, 1 year we linked up with CMX, which is a high-level strategic NATO exercise on crisis. But the time consumption is different, because at the technical level, they work 2-3 days on getting the report. The next level just receives the report and deals with it, or they come up with additional tasking for the technical team. And all that period, the strategic level is not even involved, because they just got a note which took 2 minutes of their attention, and the rest of the exercise period, they're completely not involved. So the biggest challenge there is how do you get all these trading audiences available and focused on the exercise, and the higher level you get, the more difficult it becomes, because cutting a ribbon becomes then more important than the exercise, because I'm waiting for 3 days for something to happen in the exercise, and I still have all my political requirements and all the things that I need to do. So getting the attention of the higher levels only works if you are able to give them at a certain speed all the things that they need to decide about. And if you combine those levels, then the higher levels are really waiting and waiting and waiting for the lower levels to complete things. So I would not dream about wanting to do that. I would dream about wanting to role-play those elements correctly. So exercise at different levels, exercise technical teams, and role-playing the operational level correctly with real people from the operational level who really challenge the tactical level in follow-on tasks, and how do you do it, and what are my options, and what is the benefit of one, and how do you recommend one over the other. And then taking the operational level and really role-play the strategic and tactical level correctly, because then you can focus on that level, you can give them all the challenges that you want to exercise, but get the real people to do the role-playing and get the interaction represented correctly.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I tend to agree with my colleagues. As I said earlier, the higher you get at the exercising level, and the higher the level of people that you're trying to engage, the more difficult it is to find their time. I mean, that's why they are important and decision makers, because they have to make decisions. So spending time on an exercise, I don't think it's their main priority. Or sometimes they are even afraid of failures. Yeah, if I would try to do it, I would do it in a similar way as described here. So I will not bring a full-fledged 3-day, one-week exercise with all of them, but probably I will try to feed from one exercise to the other the results of what happens at the operations layer, probably to feed that to a smaller time frame-wise exercise with a strategic layer. And then probably try to get back to the operations layer of the results of what was the decision from the strategic layer. So try to somehow link the results of the different. I think integrating the operations and the technical is not a big problem. Actually, I think to some extent both Cyber Europe and Cyber Coalition are doing that. The difficulty comes when you have the strategic layer there. And then the solution I will do is just segregate the two and feed the results from one to the other.
Right, so in Luxuals last year, we had the technical game, and then a week later we had the strategy game, and we basically gave some information for what happened the week previous to the strat game. That ended up not working very well. They had to focus on other things in the end. This year, we played it in the same time frame. We had a strategic game, we had the technical game, and then we had a simulated operational cell that was acting as a go-between between the two layers. Being techies, we called it a firewall because we wanted to make sure that no dangerous things get passed. So if a strategic level would make a decision that would destroy the tech game, we would have a way to block this, and vice versa. So that worked to an extent, but clearly there's more we could do here, and the ambition is to keep probing this field and to see where we can go. The players on the strat side were not the actual decision makers, but would be the people who advise the decision makers, and it is somewhat easier to get their time. But basically, there's a couple of options. One, you could try to just run like a pyramid exercise where lots of things happen in the tech. Some of it gets fed up to operational, some of it very, very tiny bit. goes to a strategy level, and then they might make a snap decision as part of their sort of national decision-making process. And then they just go back to cutting ribbons or whatever else they have planned for the day. The other option, which is similar to what we tried to do this year, is there's lots of stuff happening at the tech level. Some of it gets fed to the operational. But the operational people get kept busy with other sort of simulated events that happen at their level. So they look at this, including the tech bit that came from the tech level, summarize that, and send something up to the strategy level. And there, basically, they get some piece that comes from the lower parts of the game, or other parts of the game, and then you also add extra simulated events to them, and this is what we did. So there was a lot of events happening at the strategy layer of LuxShields this year that the techies were never aware of, as would be the case in a more realistic scenario. So the Prime Minister does not always communicate back to every single techie that, okay, well, yeah, this is fine. I got the report, but I also have to deal with this neighboring state, and then the UN has a vote coming up, and
Right.
So we are playing with this idea, and we hope to go further with this next year as well.
You see within LuxShields, maybe sometime in the future, you see an operational level within those two, strategic and tactical?
Yes,
Is that what you're kind of
clearly there are different ways how to approach this, and again, we have the benefit of, we have the luxury of experimenting quite a bit. So we can change the way we do things from year to year based on what we see happening in the current iteration of the game. So next year, I'm sure we're going to do something differently, because the ambition is still there to have this sort of multi-layer gameplay in LuxShields as well.
All right, fantastic. I think we have a question in the back here. Was there any more? Oh, good.
Sorry, this is Brad Bigelow from SHAPE. It's kind of a follow-on to that last discussion. And I guess first a question specifically to Tom for Cyber Coalition to clarify. Is it not true that Cyber Coalition essentially takes a below crisis level scenario in NATO terms, which means it wouldn't be actually integrated into the full operational planning execution process that takes us into the execution stage and the crisis management system? And then a broader question for all three. We've heard throughout this conference about the issue of, is cyberspace and our activities in cyberspace happening in wartime, peacetime, or is that boundary becoming blurred? How do you see the arrangements and how this feeds up to the operational level? Do you believe that you need to start constructing your exercises so that you talk about that transition? Or do you see it being confined below the crisis level, so it's clearly peacetime and it's not a conflict, law of armed conflict kind of scenario? Or is it moving in the direction of we're only exercising it as we would traditional military exercises? And most of the exercises that we practice in NATO context are about execution in crisis mode. We have, in effect, the laws of armed conflict in effect. So do you see you're staying down in kind of the safe realm pre-crisis? Do you see you exercising the transition? Or do you see that ultimately you're going to be exercising primarily in the conflict stage? Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, you're correct. We stay out of the crisis management processes within NATO with Cyber Coalition. We stay below or beyond. So the incidents that we play or the threats that we play are allowed to build up to entering crisis at index or after index. And that's really specifically done because of the aim of the exercise. Because as soon as you enter this crisis threshold, then whole different processes start to operate within NATO. So that then you're really in a different ball game. What we do have is we have an operational mission in the exercise. So that's where the crisis has already been. The initial crisis processes have taken place, and a NATO mission has been established, is deployed. There is a force generation going on. So we have already a mission with a task, with the mission objective, and then we're going to influence that mission with cyber incidents. So we place those both ends, and that's basically in support of the exercise, because in the exercise we want to train the collaboration processes that everybody has written down, that everybody wants to adhere to, MOUs that exist, all these things that are regulated, and we want to go through them so everybody understands what can be expected from this, what is expected, and what we can improve also on those. And the executive point, the transition point, we want to prevent, because it's not an aim of the exercise. Because what's happening in the transition is a really political process. It's a real different ball game where procedures might be overruled because of the situation of the crisis. And that's not the aim of the exercise. That's why we're not exercising it. Do we need to exercise that? Yes, I think we need to exercise that because it's an important thing. But then it really becomes a political strategic exercise, because that's where the leaders of the allies sit together and actually decide on what can we do and what should we do and how should we handle this specific situation. So yes, it's not part of cyber coalition. Should we exercise it? Yes, but not in a cyber coalition context. It's a different context and a different exercise.
Right. Yeah. How about for?
Yep. First of all, let me start by saying that Cyber Europe is already integrating or is already having this notion of dealing with cyber crisis. And when I'm talking about crisis, I would differentiate between the classical term of crisis, where you have where you mainly trying to deal with the impact. Cyber crisis, I think, given the speed that they can evolve, given how global they can be, the focus is not only on managing the impact, or to be precise, you can manage the impact by fighting the cause. That's one of the differentiations that we see, and we have studied. We've done a few studies on this subject, and I urge you to go and to look at our website for cyber crisis. So in that sense, and since the beginning, Cyber Europe was designed as a cyber crisis exercise. So we are trying to deal with crisis situations. We're trying to deal with situations where things are very bad and decisions need to be taken. And again, as I said, you are fighting the impact. I'll give you an example. In classical crisis management, you have a crisis like a volcano that's erupted in Iceland, and the whole Europe is all the airports are closed. You cannot do anything to fight the cause. It's a volcano. While in a cyber crisis, where the cause can be a huge denial of service attack, you can do a lot to manage the impact by fighting the actual cause of the cyber attack. So in that sense, we have included cyber crisis into our exercises. But I will put a disclaimer here. Actually, we had that discussion 2 weeks ago when we had the after-action workshop of Cyber Europe 2016. And we had around the table all the representatives from the countries. And in our report, it is mentioned that Cyber Europe is a cyber crisis exercise. And we had a few countries who said that, look, during Cyber Europe, we didn't reach to a crisis level in our country. Although the majority said that they did. I think there is a differentiation, at least within the EU. There is no clear definition where all the EU is at a crisis. It's a bit vague. So you have different nations that have different thresholds for what you can define as a crisis. For example, some countries, they have it's a very simple definition of what's a crisis. If the president says that it's a crisis, that's it. While others have some more complex structures of how to define the crisis. So, answering your question, Cyber Europe already deals with that. Many countries see it like this. Some countries don't see it like this. And maybe just to justify, at least for some of them that I know that they don't see it as a cyber crisis exercise, is because in case in their country something is called a crisis, then there are other structures other than the cybersecurity authorities that will take over. And obviously, if you do that in an exercise, you are out of the game of the exercise. So they didn't define it as a crisis, mostly because they will go out of the game, because other structures within the country will take over if it is a crisis.
I think you're reaching the same point, because it's really a definition about what's a crisis. Because, of course, Cyber Coalition also has a cyber crisis, but it's not earmarked within NATO for, according to the NATO definition, as a crisis, because as soon as that happens, then you said, then complete different constructs get in place and people are put out of command and others take over. So it's really just getting at that threshold.
Just to add to that, because we are fighting a lot about this at least at the EU level, political crisis management. We think that cyber is not let's say a sector per se. It's not like it's not like, for example, an earthquake. Or it should be integrated to all the other crisis management procedures. For example, if you have a crisis management procedure which is taking place because you have floodings somewhere in the middle of Europe, then a cyber team should always be there in the crisis management cell to help, because there will be cyber consequences. There might be data centers around, there might be things which are relevant to cyber. So what we are fighting a lot is to have the cyber element within all crisis management procedures at the EU level.
Okay, I'm going to let Ray finish up with the answer.
Yes, so LuxShields is a defensive technical exercise. And from that view, not much actually changes when you transition to war, because as a network defender, you don't get much extra. Some other people might, right? There might be offense that comes into play. Somebody has to worry about air defense now, but this is not the network defender that gets sent to somewhere. Having said this, our scenarios have always been so that you start with a bad situation that at least warrants sending a rapid reaction team somewhere. Now, whether you would call it a cyber crisis or not, that is up to definitions, but at least it's bad enough that you mobilize a team, you send them somewhere, and they will start taking action. However, on the, let's say, legal and media and strategy play, we have played with escalation. We have played with, is this an armed attack? Is this a use of force? And if so, what would your country do? But again, the main focus of LuxShields is the technical game, and in the context of that technical game, the rules of engagement do not change almost at all for the defenders.
Okay, well, that concludes our time for our panel. I just want to thank our members for being here and answering questions. If you do have additional questions, our members will be around during the break. So I want to thank you very much, and I guess we're on a break right now.